Chapter 1. The Tulip in the Glass. The autumn evening draped itself over Vane Manor like a velvet curtain, heavy with the scent of damp leaves and the promise of secrets. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, adjusted his bow tie as he stepped from the chauffeured car onto the gravel drive. The manor, a sprawling Georgian edifice in the heart of Kent, glowed with the warm light of chandeliers, their reflections dancing in the tall windows. Poirot had been invited by Lady Eleanor Vane, a renowned botanist whose passion for rare flora was matched only by her reputation for eccentricity. The invitation, penned in her elegant hand, had promised an evening of botanical wonders and stimulating company. Poirot, ever curious about the peculiarities of human nature, could not resist. Inside, the grand dining hall buzzed with anticipation. The long mahogany table was adorned with silver candelabras and a centerpiece that drew every eye, a single tulip. Its petals, a vivid crimson streaked with gold, stood in a crystal vase filled with nothing but air, no water, no soil, no roots. Yet the flower stood upright, its vibrancy defying nature. Poirot's grey cells stirred at the sight. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, stroking his moustache. "A tulip without roots. This is most unnatural." Lady Eleanor Vane, a tall woman with silver hair pinned in an elegant chignon, presided over the gathering with the air of a queen. Her sharp green eyes scanned her guests, a mix of botanical enthusiasts, local gentry, and a few curious outsiders like Poirot. "Welcome, my friends," she said, her voice resonant yet tinged with an edge Poirot could not place, nervousness perhaps. "Tonight we celebrate the marvels of nature, and one marvel in particular." She gestured to the tulip, and the room fell silent, captivated by its impossible beauty. Among the guests, Poirot noted several figures of interest. Charles Fame, Lady Eleanor's nephew, was a handsome man in his 30s, his charm undercut by a restless energy. He hovered near his aunt, his smile too quick, his eyes darting to the tulip as if it held a secret he longed to unravel. Harrow, the manor's gardener, stood apart, his weathered hands clasped tightly, his gaze fixed on the floor. His knowledge of the estate's greenhouse was legendary, yet his demeanor suggested unease. Dr. Lena Voss, a botanist with a reputation for groundbreaking research, sat opposite Poirot. Her cool, analytical stare met his briefly, and he sensed a mind as sharp as his own. The remaining guests, local landowners, a journalist, and a few minor aristocrats, added to the eclectic mix, but Poirot's attention kept returning to the tulip. Dinner commenced with a flourish. Consommé, roasted pheasant, and delicate pastries, each course paired with fine wines. Conversation flowed, touching on botany, art, and the latest London gossip. Lady Eleanor spoke passionately about her latest project, hinting at a revolutionary discovery in her greenhouse. "The tulip, you see," she said, raising her glass, "is but a glimpse of what is possible when science and nature intertwine." Poirot noted Charles's forced laugh and Mr. Harrow's sudden tension. Dr. Voss, however, leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with interest. "A glimpse, Lady Eleanor?" she asked. "Or a promise?" Before Lady Eleanor could respond, a clatter broke the moment. Her wine-glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the table. She gasped, clutching her throat, her face paling. "The tulip," she whispered, her voice a ragged thread. Then, with a soft moan, she collapsed, her body crumpling to the floor. The room erupted in chaos, guests shouting, servants rushing forward. Poirot, calm amid the storm, knelt beside her, checking her pulse. It was faint, erratic. "Vite, call a doctor," he commanded, though his instincts told him it was too late. As the guests scrambled, Poirot's eyes darted to the crystal vase. The tulip was gone. In its place, the empty vase gleamed mockingly under the chandelier Sip's light. "Sacre bleu," Poirot muttered. "The flower has vanished, and with it, the key to this tragedy." The doctor arrived swiftly, but Lady Eleanor was beyond saving. Poison, he suspected, though tests would confirm it. Poirot, however, needed no laboratory to know that murder had been committed. The absence of the tulip was no coincidence. It was a clue, a deliberate act to obscure or reveal something vital. He surveyed the room, noting the guests' reactions. Charles's pale shock, Mr. Harrow's rigid silence, Dr. Voss's calculating calm. Each face held a piece of the puzzle, but the tulip itself was the enigma. Poirot approached the empty vase, examining it with care. No residue, no trace of the flower's presence. He questioned the butler, who swore no one had approached the table during the chaos. Yet the tulip had vanished as if by magic. Non, Poirot thought, not magic. Method, and method reveals the mind. He turned to Charles, who was consoling a trembling guest. "Monsieur Vane," Poirot said softly, "this tulip, your aunt spoke of it as a marvel. What do you know of it?" Charles's eyes flickered. "Nothing, really. Just one of her fancies. She loved her flowers." His voice was smooth, but Poirot detected a tremor of unease. "And yet," Poirot pressed, "it is gone, and your aunt is dead. A curious coincidence, n'est-ce pas?" Mr. Harrow, overhearing, stepped forward. "The tulip was from the greenhouse," he said gruffly. "Lady Eleanor kept it locked away. Said it was special." His hesitation caught Poirot's ear. "Special, Monsieur Harrow. In what way?" The gardener shrugged, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. "She didn't say, just that it was hers." Dr. Voss, meanwhile, watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. Poirot approached her, noting the faint ink stains on her fingers, a sign of a scientist at work. "Mademoiselle Voss, you seemed intrigued by the tulip. What is its significance?" She smiled thinly. "A botanical curiosity, Monsieur Poirot. Lady Eleanor and I discussed its potential, but I know little beyond that." Her words were measured, but Poirot sensed she held back more than she revealed. As the police arrived to secure the scene, Poirot stepped onto the terrace, the cool night air sharpening his thoughts. The tulip without roots was no mere decoration. It was a symbol, a creation that defied nature's laws. Its disappearance, coupled with Lady Eleanor's murder, suggested a motive rooted in ambition, greed, or perhaps something darker. Poirot's little grey cells hummed with possibilities. Was the tulip stolen to hide its secrets, or displayed to taunt someone? And who among the guests had the cunning to orchestrate such a crime under his very nose? He returned to the dining hall, where the empty vase stood like a silent accusation. "Oui," Poirot whispered to himself. "The mystery begins with you, mon petit tulip, but Hercule Poirot will uncover your truth." The night was young, and the game was afoot. Chapter 2. The Greenhouse of Secrets. The morning after Lady Eleanor Vane's tragic demise, Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the Vane Manor gardens, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the dew-kissed grass. The air carried the faint perfume of roses, but his destination was not the manicured flower-beds. It was the greenhouse, a glass cathedral tucked behind a copse of yew trees, where Lady Eleanor had cultivated her botanical obsessions. Poirot, ever meticulous, believed the answers to last night's murder, and the mystery of the vanished tulip lay within its humid walls. "We," he murmured, stroking his moustache, "the roots of this crime, or the lack thereof, begin here." The greenhouse loomed before him, its panes fogged with condensation, obscuring the riot of greenery within. Poirot pushed open the heavy glass door, and a wave of warm, earthy air enveloped him. Inside, the space was a labyrinth of vibrant life, orchids with delicate petals, ferns curling like question marks, and exotic blooms Poirot could not name. Narrow paths wound through the foliage, leading to a central workbench cluttered with vials, notebooks, and scientific instruments. The air hummed with the faint buzz of a ventilation system, but an undercurrent of unease lingered, as if the plants themselves held their breath. Poirot was not alone. Mr. Harrow, the gardener, stood near a row of potted lilies, pruning shears in hand. His weathered face tightened at Poirot's arrival. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot greeted, his tone genial yet probing. "This greenhouse, it is a marvel. Lady Eleanor trusted you with its care. N'est-ce pas?" Harrow nodded curtly, his eyes darting to the workbench. "Aye, she did. Spent hours here, she did, with her experiments." His voice was gruff, but Poirot detected a tremor, fear perhaps, or guilt. Poirot approached the workbench, his keen eyes scanning its contents. Among the clutter, he found Lady Eleanor's journal, its leather cover embossed with a tulip motif. He opened it, revealing pages filled with meticulous notes on plant hybridization, chemical compounds, and a recurring phrase, "the tulip without roots." One entry, dated a week prior, read, "The anomaly is stable, but the cost is high. Must protect it from those who seek to exploit it." Poirot's grey cells whirred. "This tulip," he said, turning to Harrow. "It was no ordinary flower, was it?" Harrow's shears paused mid-snip. "I don't know much about it," he muttered. "She kept that one locked away in the back." Poirot followed Harrow's reluctant gesture to a glass partition at the rear of the greenhouse. Beyond it lay a small, locked chamber, its door secured with a heavy padlock. Through the glass, Poirot glimpsed a sterile workspace, a single table, a microscope, and shelves lined with sealed vials. "Mon Dieu," he said softly. "A laboratory within a greenhouse. What secrets did Lady Eleanor guard here?" Harrow claimed ignorance of the key's whereabouts, but his fidgeting hands betrayed him. Poirot made a mental note to return with a locksmith. Poirot saying, "System, asterisk. The system has detected that the response was cut off. Here's the continuation to complete Chapter 2, ensuring it meets the 1,200-word requirement and maintains the narrative flow. Know anything about locks?" Poirot's smile was thin but polite. "Of course, monsieur, yet secrets have a way of unlocking themselves." Leaving Harrow to his pruning, Poirot sought out Dr. Lena Voss, whom he found outside, examining a rosebush with clinical precision. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, and her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, met his with guarded curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, straightening, "you're exploring the greenhouse, I presume, looking for answers." Her tone was cool, but Poirot sensed a challenge. "Précisément, Mademoiselle Voss," he replied. "The tulip without roots intrigues me. You worked with Lady Eleanor, did you not? What can you tell me of this anomaly?" Lena's expression flickered, a shadow of unease passing over her face. "It was an experiment," she said carefully. "A plant engineered to thrive without traditional roots. Eleanor was brilliant, but secretive. She shared only fragments of her work with me." Poirot noted the tension in her voice. "And yet," he pressed, "you were her collaborator. Surely you know more than you say." Lena's lips tightened. "I know it was valuable, potentially revolutionary, but I wasn't involved in its final stages." She hesitated, then added, "Eleanor was worried someone might steal it. She mentioned a threat, but never named it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A threat?" This was new. "A threat, mademoiselle? To the tulip or to her life?" Lena shook her head. She didn't say, but she was cautious. Poirot's thoughts raced. The journal, the locked chamber, and now a threat. Each piece of the puzzle pointed to the tulip as more than a botanical curiosity. He decided to inspect the grounds further, guided by a young groundskeeper named Tom, who had reported seeing a shadowy figure near the greenhouse the previous night. Tom, a lanky lad with nervous eyes, led Poirot to a secluded corner of the garden. "It was dark, sir," Tom said, pointing to a patch of disturbed soil near the greenhouse wall. "I saw someone moving fast toward the woods. Couldn't see their face." Poirot knelt, examining the soil. The footprints were faint, blurred by last night's rain, but they were deep enough to suggest a man of average build. The trail led to a low stone wall, beyond which lay a dense thicket. "Interessant," Poirot murmured. "A visitor in the night, and yet the tulip was taken from the dining room." Poirot. He thanked Tom, who shuffled off, clearly eager to be free of the detective's scrutiny. Returning to the greenhouse, Poirot encountered Charles the Fane, who was pacing near the entrance, his face pale. "Monsieur Poirot," Charles said, forcing a smile. "Any progress? The police are crawling all over, asking questions." Poirot tilted his head. "Progress, Monsieur Vane, is a matter of method. Tell me, what was your aunt's obsession with this tulip?" Charles shrugged, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. "She loved her plants. That tulip was just special to her. I didn't ask questions. His casual dismissal rang false, and Poirot noted it for later. As the morning sun climbed higher, Poirot re-entered the greenhouse, determined to find the locked chamber's key. He searched the workbench again, this time noticing a small vial tucked beneath a pile of papers. It contained a greenish residue, and its label bore a tiny tulip symbol. Poirot's pulse quickened. He summoned Harrow, who paled at the sight of the vial. "That's one of her compounds," Harrow stammered. "For the plants, I think." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "For plants or for poison?" Harrow recoiled, insisting he knew nothing of poisons. Poirot sent the vial to the police for analysis, suspecting it held traces of the toxin that killed Lady Eleanor. The greenhouse, he realized, was not just a place of beauty. It was a vault of secrets, and the tulip without roots was its heart. The locked chamber, the journal, the shadowy figure, and now the vial, all pointed to a conspiracy deeper than a simple murder. But who stood to gain? Harrow, with his intimate knowledge of the greenhouse, Voss, with her scientific ambitions, or Charles, with his inheritance at stake. As Poirot stepped outside, the greenhouse's glass walls glinted in the sunlight, reflecting a distorted image of the manor. The truth, he thought, is like this glass, clear yet deceptive. He resolved to unlock the chamber and confront the suspects again. The tulip without roots was no mere flower. It was a symbol of ambition, a creation that defied nature's order, and Poirot, with his little grey cells, would restore that order before the case was done. Chapter 3. The Nephew Sept's Ambition. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Vane Manor, but Hercule Poirot's mind was far from the serene beauty of the Kent countryside. His little grey cells buzzed with the threads of the mystery, Lady Eleanor's poisoning, the vanished tulip without roots, and the secrets hidden in her greenhouse. Now his attention turned to Charles Vane, the charming yet restless nephew who stood to inherit his aunt's vast estate. Poirot had observed Charles' forced smiles and evasive answers the night of the murder, and he suspected the young man's ambitions held a key to the crime. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured to himself, adjusting his hat. "Ambition is a dangerous seed, and it grows in the shadow of greed." Poirot found Charles in the manor's library, a grand room lined with leather-bound volumes and portraits of Vane ancestors. Charles stood by a window, his hands in his pockets, staring out at the gardens. His tailored suit was impeccable, but his posture betrayed unease. A slight slouch, a nervous twitch of his fingers. "Monsieur Vane," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet. "A word, if you please." Charles turned, his smile quick but strained. "Of course, Monsieur Poirot. Anything to help clear up this dreadful business." Poirot settled into a high-backed chair, his eyes never leaving Charles. "You were close to your aunt, n'est-ce pas? Yet you seem unperturbed by her loss." Charles's smile faltered. "I'm devastated, naturally," he said, his voice a touch too earnest. "But Aunt Eleanor was eccentric, always fussing over her plants. I didn't understand her obsessions." Poirot tilted his head. "And this tulip without roots. You called it a fancy, yet it vanished as she died. A curious coincidence, no?" Charles shifted, his eyes darting to the door. "I told you I don't know anything about that flower. It was just one of her projects." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Just a project? Mon Dieu, monsieur. For a project, it has caused much trouble." He leaned forward, his voice softening. "Tell me, what do you know of your aunt's fortune, and your place in it?" Charles's face tightened, but he recovered quickly. "Her fortune? Well, I'm her only family, so I suppose I'll inherit, but I don't care about the money." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Vraiment? Then why, monsieur, do I hear whispers of your debts in London, gambling perhaps, or investments gone awry?" Charles's cheeks flushed. "That's none of your business," he snapped, then softened. "I mean, I've had some troubles, but nothing serious. Aunt Eleanor knew I'd sort it out." Poirot made a mental note of Charles's defensiveness and decided to press further. He had learned from the butler that Charles's rooms were in the East Wing, and with the police occupied elsewhere, Poirot requested permission to inspect them. Charles hesitated but agreed, perhaps fearing refusal would arouse suspicion. The rooms were spacious, with a view of the greenhouse, and cluttered with signs of a restless life, unpaid bills tucked into a drawer, a half-packed suitcase, and a photograph of Charles with a man Poirot didn't recognize, a rival botanist perhaps. As Charles hovered nervously, Poirot's keen eyes caught a glint of paper beneath the desk. He knelt, retrieving a torn letter, its edges singed as if someone had tried to burn it. Piecing it together, he read fragments. The tulip is the key. Deal must be struck. Millions at stake. The signature was missing, but the letterhead bore the logo of a biotech firm, Verdant Innovations. Poirot's grey cells hummed. "Monsieur Vane," he said, holding up the letter. "What is this deal concerning the tulip?" Charles's eyes widened, and he snatched the paper, crumpling it. "That's nothing. Just business nonsense. You're poking into things that don't concern you." Poirot's smile was serene but unyielding. "Au contraire, everything concerns Hercule Poirot when murder is involved. This letter suggests the tulip was no mere flower, but a prize worth millions. And you, monsieur, were in need of such a prize. None." Charles's bravado crumbled. "I didn't kill her," he said, his voice low. "Yes, I've got debts. Yes, I talked to some people about her work, but I'd never hurt her." Poirot studied him, noting the beads of sweat on his brow. "Then who, monsieur, did you speak to?" "This Verdant Innovations, perhaps." Charles shook his head, his lips sealed. Poirot did not press further. He had planted a seed of doubt, and Charles's reaction would bear fruit in time. Leaving the East Wing, Poirot sought out the manor's housekeeper, Mrs. Grayson, a stout woman with a no-nonsense air. She confirmed Charles's financial troubles, recounting overheard arguments between him and Lady Eleanor. She didn't trust him, Mrs. Grayson said, polishing a silver tray. Said he was too eager for her money, always asking about her experiments. She caught him snooping in the greenhouse once, and they had a terrible row. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the tulip, madame, did she speak of it?" Mrs. Grayson nodded. She called it her legacy, said it would change everything, but it had to be protected. Poirot's thoughts returned to the torn letter. Verdant Innovations was a name to investigate, and Charles's connection to it suggested a motive beyond inheritance. Had he planned to sell the tulip's secrets to settle his debts, or was he a pawn in a larger game? Poirot recalled Lady Eleanor's journal, with its cryptic warning about those who sought to exploit the tulip. Charles, with his charm and desperation, fit the profile of an opportunist, but Poirot sensed layers yet to be uncovered. As evening approached, Poirot strolled to the greenhouse, where the police were still cataloguing evidence. The locked chamber remained unopened, the key still missing, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere. He pictured Charles at the dinner, his eyes on the tulip, his laughter too loud. The nephew's ambition was a thread in the tapestry of this crime, but was it the only one? Dr. Voss's scientific interest, Mr. Harrow's unease, and the shadowy figure in the garden all lingered in Poirot's thoughts. Standing before the greenhouse, its glass panes reflecting the fading light, Poirot felt the weight of the mystery. The tulip without roots was a symbol of ambition unbound by nature's laws, and Charles Vane's ambition seemed equally untethered. Patience, Hercule, he told himself. The truth, like a flower, will bloom in time, but time, he knew, was a luxury the killer would not grant him. Chapter 4. The botanist Esther's burden. The late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Vane Manor, casting a golden glow over the drawing-room where Hercule Poirot sat, his hands folded neatly over his lap. The events of the previous day, Lady Eleanor's poisoning, the vanishing tulip without roots, and the clues unearthed in the greenhouse and Charles Vane's rooms, had set his little grey cells alight. Now his focus turned to Dr. Lena Voss, the enigmatic botanist, whose sharp intellect and guarded demeanour suggested she knew more about the rootless tulip than she had admitted. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, stroking his moustache. "The mind of a scientist is a labyrinth, and Mademoiselle Voss hides many paths." Poirot found Dr. Voss in the Manor's conservatory, a smaller glass house adjacent to the main greenhouse, where she was examining a tray of seedlings under a magnifying glass. Her dark hair was tied back, and her hands moved with precision, but her eyes flicked toward Poirot as he approached, betraying a flicker of wariness. "Mademoiselle Voss," Poirot began, his tone courteous yet probing, "you are a woman of science, n'est-ce pas? And science, it seeks truth. Yet I sense you have not shared all you know about Lady Eleanor's tulip." Lena set down her magnifying glass, her expression cool but composed. "I've told you what I know, Monsieur Poirot. The tulip was part of Eleanor's work, a remarkable experiment, but I was only peripherally involved." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Peripherally? Vremen? Yet you dined at her table, you worked in her greenhouse, and you spoke of the tulip's potential with such enthusiasm." He paused, watching her closely. "What is this potential, mademoiselle, and why did Lady Eleanor fear its theft?" Lena's fingers tightened around a pencil, but her voice remained steady. "Eleanor was paranoid," she said. "She believed her work was at risk, but she never shared details. The tulip was a prototype, a plant engineered to survive without roots, defying natural limits. It could revolutionize agriculture, perhaps even medicine, but I wasn't privy to its final development." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet you are a botanist of renown. Surely you contributed more than you claim." A shadow crossed Lena's face, and Poirot seized the moment. "I have heard, mademoiselle, of a rivalry between you and Lady Eleanor, a falling out. Oui? Years ago, at a botanical conference in Vienna." Lena's eyes narrowed, but she didn't deny it. "It was professional," she said curtly. "We disagreed on methodology. Eleanor favored bold experimentation. I preferred caution. She won the grants, the acclaim, but that's in the past." Poirot's smile was serene. "The past, mademoiselle, has a way of blooming in the present, like a flower without roots." Determined to probe further, Poirot requested to see Lena's research notes, which she kept in a satchel in the conservatory. She hesitated but complied, perhaps sensing that refusal would arouse suspicion. The notes were meticulous, filled with diagrams of plant genomes and chemical compounds. One page, dog-eared and heavily annotated, caught Poirot's eye. It described a genetic anomaly in a tulip strain, capable of self-sustaining growth without soil. The term tulip without roots was underlined, with a note in Lena's hand. "Eleanor's breakthrough, but at what cost?" Poirot's grey cells hummed. "This anomaly," he said, holding up the page, "it is valuable, non-valuable enough to kill for." Lena's composure faltered. "I didn't kill her," she said sharply. "Yes, the tulip could be worth millions, billions. Even, it could grow in barren lands, feed millions. But I'm a scientist, not a murderer." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And yet, mademoiselle, science and ambition are close companions. Did you not resent Lady Eleanor's success with this tulip?" Lena's lips pressed into a thin line. "I admired her, even if we clashed. I wanted to learn from her, not harm her." Poirot's attention shifted as a maid entered the conservatory, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, glancing nervously at Lena, "I saw something the night of the murder. Dr. Voss and Lady Eleanor were arguing in the hall, hours before the dinner. It was heated. Something about the tulip and a betrayal." Lena's eyes flashed, but she remained silent. Poirot thanked the maid, who scurried away, and turned back to Lena. "An argument, mademoiselle. Perhaps you can explain." Lena sighed, her shoulders sagging slightly. "It was a misunderstanding," she said. "Eleanor accused me of sharing our research with a competitor. I denied it, but she was furious. She thought I wanted to steal her work." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And did you, mademoiselle, or did you simply wish to claim credit for what you both created?" Lena's voice was low, almost a whisper. "I wanted recognition. Yes, but not like this." Leaving the conservatory, Poirot reflected on Lena's words. Her ambition was clear, but was it murderous? The maid's testimony and the research notes suggested Lena had both motive and opportunity. Yet her passion for the tulip seemed genuine, not malicious. Poirot decided to cross-reference her story with the greenhouse findings. He returned to Lady Eleanor's journal, which he had borrowed from the police, and found an entry dated a month prior. Lena presses for publication, but the tulip is not ready. Her impatience could ruin everything. The word ruin was underlined twice. As evening fell, Poirot walked the manor grounds, the greenhouse glowing faintly in the distance. He recalled the torn letter in Charles's room, mentioning a deal and verdant innovations. Could Lena have been involved in such a deal, perhaps betraying Lady Eleanor's trust? Or was she, like Charles, a pawn in a larger scheme? The Tulip Without Roots, with its promise of wealth and innovation, was a magnet for ambition, and Lena's scientific zeal made her a compelling suspect. Standing beneath the yew trees, Poirot gazed at the stars, his mind weaving the threads of the case. The tulip, he thought, is a creation of genius, but also of obsession. And obsession, mon ami, can lead to betrayal. Lena Voss carried a burden not just of knowledge, but of rivalry and regret. Whether it led to murder, Poirot would soon discover. Chapter 5. The Shadow in the Garden. The twilight air hung heavy over Vane Manor, the gardens cloaked in a mist that curled around the ancient yews like whispered secrets. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the evening chill, stood near the greenhouse, his sharp eyes tracing the path where young Tom, the groundskeeper, had reported seeing a shadowy figure on the night of Lady Eleanor's murder. The tulip without roots, the poison, the torn letter, and Dr. Voss's guarded revelations had woven a complex tapestry, but this new clue, a mysterious intruder, suggested the mystery extended beyond the manor's walls. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, twirling his moustache. A shadow moves in the dark, but Hercule Poirot will bring it to light. Poirot retraced Tom's steps, guided by the lad's nervous recounting. The greenhouse loomed to his left, its glass panes glinting faintly under the rising moon. Tom had described the figure as swift, vanishing into the woods beyond a low stone wall. Poirot examined the ground near the greenhouse wall, where the soil was still soft from recent rain. The footprints, though faded, were unmistakable. A man's shoes, size 10 perhaps, with a distinctive tread that suggested quality boots. "Interessant," Poirot said softly. "Not a servant's tread, nor a gardener's. Someone who does not belong." He followed the trail to the stone wall, where the prints disappeared into a tangle of brambles. Beyond lay a dense thicket, impassable without a struggle. Poirot's grey cells hummed. Why had the figure come to the greenhouse? To steal the tulip? To sabotage Lady Eleanor's work? Or to ensure her silence? The tulip's disappearance from the dining room suggested it was already in play, but this nocturnal visitor hinted at a broader conspiracy. Poirot turned his attention to a nearby garden shed, its weathered door slightly ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of earth and oil. Rakes and shovels lined the walls, but Poirot's keen eyes spotted a locked cabinet in the corner, its padlock gleaming new against the shed's rustic wood. He summoned Tom, who arrived clutching a cap, his eyes wide. "Monsieur Tom," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. "This cabinet, do you know its contents?" Tom shook his head. "No, sir. That's Mr. Harrow's. He keeps it locked, says it's for special tools." Poirot's moustache twitched. Special tools, indeed. He persuaded Tom to fetch a crowbar, citing the urgency of the investigation. With a reluctant grunt, Tom pried open the cabinet, revealing a trove of unexpected items, vials of chemicals, a small centrifuge, and a set of precision scalpels, all marked with the same tulip symbol Poirot had seen on the vial in the greenhouse. "Secre bleu," he whispered. "This is no gardener's shed. It is a laboratory in disguise." The discovery raised new questions. Genetic modification required expertise beyond a gardener's scope, yet Mr. Harrow had access to these tools. Was he more than he seemed, or was the shed a hiding place for another's work? Poirot pocketed a small notebook found among the tools, its pages filled with cryptic notations about rootless propagation and enzyme catalysts. The handwriting was not Lady Eleanor's, nor did it match Lena Voss's precise script. A third player, perhaps. Poirot questioned Tom further, probing for details about the shadowy figure. Was there anything distinctive, monsieur? A sound, a glimpse of clothing. Tom frowned, thinking. He was tall, sir, and moved quick-like. I heard a clink, like metal, maybe a key or a tool. Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. A clink could mean many things: a weapon, a key to the greenhouse's locked chamber, or something yet unknown. Seeking more context, Poirot visited the manor's kitchen, where the staff gathered to gossip. Mrs. Grayson, the housekeeper, was polishing silver, her lips pursed with disapproval. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "this talk of shadows is unsettling the staff. First Lady Eleanor, now strangers in the garden." Poirot leaned closer, his voice soothing. "Madame, you know this estate well. Have there been other strangers, perhaps a former employee with a grudge?" Mrs. Grayson hesitated, then lowered her voice. "There was Victor Klein, a botanist who worked here years ago. Lady Eleanor sacked him for tampering with her plants. Unethical, she called it. He swore he'd get even, then vanished. No one's seen him since." Poirot's eyes gleamed. A disgraced botanist with a vendetta was a promising lead. And this Victor Klein, madame, did he know of the Tulip project? Mrs. Grayson shrugged. "He worked on early experiments before my time, but he was clever." Too clever, some said. Poirot thanked her, his mind racing. Victor Klein could be the shadowy figure, or perhaps a mastermind pulling strings from afar. Returning to the greenhouse, Poirot encountered Mr. Harrow, who was tending a row of orchids. The gardener's hands trembled slightly as Poirot mentioned the shed. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "these tools in your cabinet, they are not for pruning, non. They suggest a knowledge of science most advanced." Harrow's face reddened. "Those aren't mine," he said gruffly. "Lady Eleanor used the shed for her experiments. I just kept it locked." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And yet you did not mention this before. Why, monsieur?" Harrow muttered something about loyalty to Lady Eleanor, but Poirot sensed evasion. The gardener's unease, the hidden tools, and the shadowy figure pointed to a web of deception. Poirot decided to investigate Victor Klein's history. Suspecting the former employee's knowledge of the Tulip project made him a dangerous variable. He also resolved to have the police analyze the notebook's handwriting, hoping it would reveal the third player. As night fell, Poirot stood by the greenhouse, the mist curling around him like a shroud. The shadowy figure was a new thread in the tapestry, one that suggested an external threat to Lady Eleanor's work. The Tulip Without Roots, with its promise of wealth and power, had drawn predators to Vane Manor. Was the shadow Victor Klein, seeking revenge, or someone else, working with Charles or Lena? Patience Hercule, Poirot thought, gazing at the stars. The shadow will step into the light, and the truth will follow. Chapter 6. The poison scepter's provenance. The morning mist had burned away, leaving Vane Manor bathed in the crisp light of a Kentish dawn. Hercule Poirot stood in the manor's study, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind a whirl of connections. The vanished tulip without roots, the shadowy figure in the garden, Charles Vane's torn letter, Dr. Lynn Voss's guarded notes, and the hidden tools in Mr. Harrow's shed. Yet one question loomed largest. How had Lady Eleanor been poisoned, and what linked the poison to the tulip? Mon Dieu! Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. The poison is the thread that binds this mystery. Hercule Poirot will follow it to the truth. Determined to unravel the murder's mechanics, Poirot sought the expertise of Dr. Alistair Finch, a toxicologist and old acquaintance from a previous case in London. Finch, a wiry man with a penchant for precision, arrived at the manor by mid-morning, carrying a leather case filled with analytical tools. Poirot greeted him in the drawing-room, where the police had permitted a private consultation. "Mon cher Alistair," Poirot said, his tone warm but urgent, "we face a poison most subtle used to silence Lady Eleanor Vane. Can you help Poirot uncover its nature?" Dr. Finch examined the preliminary autopsy report, provided by the local coroner, and a sample of the wine Lady Eleanor had consumed before her collapse. "A fast-acting toxin," Finch mused, peering through his spectacles. "Symptoms, convulsions, respiratory distress, suggest a plant-based alkaloid, rare but not unheard of. I'll need to run tests, but it resembles something like aconitine or a derivative. Poirot's moustache twitched. A plant-based poison, n'est-ce pas? And Lady Eleanor, she was a botanist, surrounded by plants in her greenhouse. Leaving Finch to his analysis, Poirot returned to the greenhouse, its glass walls shimmering in the sunlight. The air inside was humid, thick with the scent of earth and blooms. He recalled the vial he had found on the workbench in Chapter 2, marked with a tulip symbol and containing a greenish residue. Suspecting it held the key, Poirot searched for similar clues. His meticulous inspection led him to a hidden compartment beneath a shelf of potted ferns, revealed by a loose panel. Inside he found another vial, identical to the first, its contents a pale, viscous liquid. The tulip symbol was etched into the glass, and a faint label read Extract, Trial 7. Sacre bleu, Poirot whispered, holding the vial to the light. This is no fertilizer. This is the poison's provenance. He sent the vial to Dr. Finch for immediate analysis, then turned his attention to the greenhouse's occupants. Harrow was tending a row of orchids, his hands steady but his eyes wary. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot said, approaching with a disarming smile, "this greenhouse, it holds many secrets. Oui? Tell me, what do you know of this Trial 7? Harrow's shears paused mid-snip. "Trial 7. I don't know anything about that." Lady Eleanor kept her experiments private. His voice was gruff, but Poirot noted a bead of sweat on his brow. And yet Poirot pressed, "You have access to every corner of this greenhouse. A vial marked with a tulip symbol, hidden so carefully, surely you have seen such things." Harrow shook his head, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I just tend the plants, sir, that's all." Poirot's grey cells hummed. Harrow's denial was plausible, but his unease suggested knowledge, if not guilt. Poirot decided to consult Dr. Vass, whose scientific expertise made her a likely candidate for creating such a poison. He found her in the conservatory, annotating a notebook with feverish intensity. "Mademoiselle Vass," Poirot began, "a poison has been identified, derived from a plant. You, with your knowledge of botany, must know how such a thing is made.
System asterisk.
The system has detected that the response was cut off. Here's the continuation to complete. Chapter 6. Ensuring it meets the 1,200-word requirement and maintains the narrative flow. Goes made. Lena looked up, her eyes sharp. A plant-based poison. That's a broad category, Monsieur Poirot. Many plants here could be toxic in the right hands. Her tone was cool, but Poirot detected a flicker of unease. "Précisément," Poirot said, producing the vial from his pocket. "This, mademoiselle, was found hidden in the greenhouse. A tulip symbol, a label marked Trial 7. A poison, perhaps." Lena's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. "I've seen similar vials," she admitted. "Eleanor used them for experimental extracts. But I don't know what Trial 7 is. She was secretive about her final tests." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Secretive? Yet you were her collaborator. Did you not share such knowledge?" Lena's jaw tightened. "She didn't trust me fully. Not after our disagreements." Poirot nodded, recalling their rivalry from Chapter 4. "And this poison," he said, "it requires expertise to extract, expertise such as yours. N'est-ce pas?" Lena's gaze hardened. "I'm not a murderer, monsieur. I study life, not death." Leaving the conservatory, Poirot received a message from Dr. Finch, who had completed his analysis. Meeting in the study, Finch confirmed the vial's contents matched the poison in Lady Eleanor's system, a rare alkaloid derived from a hybrid plant recently cultivated in the greenhouse. "It's a complex process," Finch said. "Only someone with advanced botanical knowledge could produce it." Poirot's mind raced. Lena Vos, Mr. Harrow, or perhaps the mysterious Victor Klein from Chapter 5, each had the potential expertise. Poirot returned to the greenhouse where he found Charles Van lingering near the entrance, his face drawn. "Monsieur Van," Poirot said. You seem troubled. Is it the poison or the tulip? Charles's eyes darted to the vial in Poirot's hand. I don't know anything about poisons, he said quickly. Aunt Eleanor was always mixing things in here. Poirot noted his nervousness, recalling the torn letter from Chapter 3. Was Charles hiding a connection to the poison's creation? As evening fell, Poirot stood outside, the greenhouse glowing faintly in the dusk. The vial's tulip symbol linked the poison directly to Lady Eleanor's project, suggesting the murder was tied to the tulip's value. The list of suspects narrowed. Lena's expertise, Harrow's access, Charles's debts, and Klein's grudge all pointed to motives. But the shadowy figure from Chapter 5 loomed in Poirot's mind, a wild card in this deadly game. The poison, Poirot thought, is the heart of this crime, and the tulip is its soul. He resolved to confront the suspects with this new evidence, knowing the killer's mask was slipping. The greenhouse, with its secrets and shadows, held the truth, and Poirot would unearth it with his little grey cells. Chapter 7. The Will and the Warning. The morning sun filtered through the heavy drapes of Vane Manor's library, casting a soft glow on the leather-bound volumes that lined its walls. Hercule Poirot sat at a polished oak table, his posture impeccable, his mind a whirlwind of deductions. The poison's plant-based origin, the hidden vial, the shadowy figure, and the motives of Charles Vane and Dr. Lena Voss had woven a complex web, but Poirot sensed a new thread awaited, Lady Eleanor's will. Mon Dieu, he murmured, stroking his moustache. A fortune is a powerful motive, and where there is a will, there is a way to murder. Poirot had arranged to meet Mr. Reginald Thorne, Lady Eleanor's solicitor, a wiry man with a pince-nez and a demeanour as precise as Poirot's own. Thorne arrived promptly, carrying a leather portfolio containing the will. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I understand you're assisting the police. Lady Eleanor's death is a tragedy, and her will may shed light on certain matters." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Précisément, Monsieur Thorne. The disposition of her estate may reveal who stood to gain from her untimely end." Thorne opened the portfolio and slid the document across the table. The will was dated 3 months prior, its pages crisp and formal. Poirot read carefully, noting the key provisions. The bulk of Lady Eleanor's estate, Vane Manor, her investments, and her botanical patents, was bequeathed to the Vane Botanical Research Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to advancing plant science. Charles Vane, her nephew, would inherit only a modest stipend unless he could prove his loyalty and stewardship to her legacy within a year of her death. A final clause stipulated that her greenhouse and its contents, including all experimental data, were to be managed by the foundation. "Interessant," Poirot said, tapping the page. "This foundation, Monsieur Thorne, what do you know of it?" Thorne cleared his throat. "It was Lady Eleanor's passion project. She founded it to protect her work from commercial exploitation. The board includes respected botanists, but she was its primary benefactor." Poirot's grey cells hummed. A foundation stood to gain millions, while Charles's inheritance hung by a thread. And Charles, Poirot asked, was he aware of these terms? Thorne nodded. He was displeased. He argued with Lady Eleanor about it, claiming the foundation was a front for greedy scientists. Poirot's attention was drawn to a folded note tucked into the will, sealed with Lady Eleanor's personal wax stamp. He broke the seal, revealing a handwritten message in her elegant script. "Beware the flower that defies nature. Its beauty hides a dangerous truth, and those who covet it will betray." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Sacre bleu," he whispered. "A warning, and it speaks of the tulip without roots." He turned to Thorne. "This note, monsieur, was it meant for someone specific?" Thorne shook his head. She insisted it be included, but gave no explanation. The note's cryptic message echoed the journal entries Poirot had found in the greenhouse, warning of exploitation. Was the tulip's dangerous truth? Its scientific value, or something more sinister? Poirot resolved to confront Charles, whose financial troubles and torn letter from Chapter 3 suggested he had motive to hasten his aunt's death. He found Charles in the drawing-room, pacing before a portrait of Lady Eleanor. "Monsieur Vane," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "this will, It does not favor you, non. A modest stipend, unless you prove your loyalty. A difficult task, perhaps, with debts pressing. Charles' face reddened. That will is a travesty, he snapped. Aunt Eleanor was manipulated by those foundation vultures. They wanted her patents, her tulip, everything. I tried to warn her, but she wouldn't listen. Poirot tilted his head. Warn her, monsieur, or persuade her to change her will. Charles' eyes flashed. I loved her, Poirot. I wouldn't kill her. But that foundation, it's not what it seems. Ask Dr. Voss. She knows their game. Poirot's mind raced. Charles's accusation aligned with the torn letter mentioning a deal with Verdant Innovations, a biotech firm. Was the foundation a front, as Charles claimed, or was he deflecting blame? Poirot decided to probe further, visiting Mrs. Grayson, the housekeeper, who was dusting in the hall. "Madame," he said, "this foundation, did Lady Eleanor speak of it?" Mrs. Grayson nodded. She was proud of it, but worried. Said some board members were too close to industry types. She caught Charles meeting one of them, a woman from a company in the village last month. This revelation sharpened Poirot's focus. The woman could be linked to Verdant Innovations, tying Charles to a corporate motive. He returned to the greenhouse, where the police had finally opened the locked chamber from Chapter 2. Inside, Poirot found more evidence of the Tulip project, sealed files labeled rootless propagation, and a photograph of Lady Eleanor with a man in a lab coat, possibly Victor Klein from Chapter 5. The files mentioned the foundation as the intended guardian of the Tulip's patents, but a handwritten note in the margin read, "Trust must be earned." As evening descended, Poirot stood on the manor's terrace, the greenhouse a dark silhouette against the sky. The will's conditions and the cryptic note suggested Lady Eleanor feared betrayal, perhaps from Charles, the foundation, or even Dr. Voss, who had ties to the scientific community. The Tulip Without Roots, with its promise of wealth and innovation, was a prize worth killing for, and the will had raised the stakes. The flower that defies nature, Poirot thought, is a magnet for greed, and greed leads to murder. He resolved to investigate the Foundation's board and its ties to Verdant Innovations, suspecting a corporate hand behind the crime. Charles's desperation, Lena's expertise, Harrow's secrets, and the shadowy Klein formed a web of motives, but the will's warning pointed to a deeper truth. Poirot's grey cells worked tirelessly, weaving the clues into a pattern only he could see. The truth, like the tulip, was within reach. He needed only to uproot it. Chapter 8. The Disgraced Apprentice. The evening shadows stretched long across the Kentish countryside, wrapping Vane Manor in a hush that seemed to hold its breath. Hercule Poirot stood in the manor's study, his polished shoes gleaming under the lamplight, his mind a whirl of connections, the poison's plant-based origin, the cryptic will, the hidden vial, and the shadowy figure in the garden. The mention of Victor Klein, Lady Eleanor's disgraced former apprentice, had ignited Poirot's curiosity. A man with a grudge and botanical expertise could be the key to unraveling the mystery of the Tulip Without Roots. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, stroking his moustache. A shadow from the past casts a long darkness. Hercule Poirot will illuminate it. Poirot had learned from Mrs. Grayson in Chapter 5 that Victor Klein, a brilliant but unethical botanist, had been sacked by Lady Eleanor years ago for tampering with her experiments. His vow of revenge and his sudden disappearance made him a compelling suspect, especially given the groundskeeper's sighting of a shadowy figure. Determined to track him down, Poirot enlisted the help of Inspector Davies, the local police officer overseeing the case. Davies's inquiries revealed that Klein was living in a modest cottage on the outskirts of a nearby village, eking out a living as a freelance herbalist. Poirot set out the next morning, driven by the manor's chauffeur through winding lanes to Klein's address. The cottage was a ramshackle affair, its garden overgrown with weeds, a stark contrast to the meticulous order of Vane Manor's greenhouse. Klein answered the door, a lean man in his 40s with sharp features and eyes that burned with quiet intensity. His hands, stained with soil, suggested he still dabbled in botany. "Monsieur Klein," Poirot said, his tone courteous but probing, "I am Hercule Poirot, and I investigate the murder of Lady Eleanor Vane. You knew her well, n'est-ce pas? Klein's expression hardened, but he invited Poirot inside. The cottage was cluttered with books, dried plants, and scientific journals, a testament to a mind still obsessed with botany. I heard about Eleanor, Klein said, his voice low. A shame, but not my concern. We parted ways years ago. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Parted ways, monsieur, or were you dismissed for unethical practices? Klein's jaw tightened. She called it unethical. I called it innovation. She stole my ideas and cast me out. Poirot settled into a creaking chair, his gaze never leaving Poirot. And these ideas, monsieur? They involved a tulip, perhaps. A tulip without roots. Poirot's eyes flickered, a spark of recognition betraying him. I don't know what you mean, he said, but his hands fidgeted with a pen. Poirot pressed further.
Vraiment?
Yet you were seen near Vane Manor the night of the murder. A shadowy figure, tall, swift. Does this sound familiar? Colin stood abruptly, his voice sharp. I wasn't there. Whoever says so is lying. But Poirot's grey cells were alight. He noticed a stack of old notebooks on a shelf, their covers worn but marked with a familiar tulip symbol. May I, monsieur? Poirot asked, gesturing to the notebooks. Colin hesitated, then shrugged, perhaps hoping to deflect suspicion. Poirot opened one, dated 5 years prior, and found a detailed sketch of a tulip, its stem ending abruptly, no roots depicted. Beside it, Colin had written, "Rootless propagation viable. Eleanor refuses to pursue. She'll regret it." "Sacre bleu," Poirot said softly, holding up the sketch. "This is no coincidence, Monsieur Clow. You knew of the tulip's potential, and you resented Lady Eleanor's success." Poirot's face darkened. "She took my work, claimed it as her own. That tulip was my idea, a plant that could grow anywhere worth millions. She had no right to keep it." Poirot tilted his head. "And so you returned to Vane Manor, to reclaim what was yours, or to ensure her silence." Klein's voice rose, laced with bitterness. "I didn't kill her. Yes, I was angry. Yes, I knew about the tulip. But I've been here, working alone, far from her precious estate." Poirot noted the man's passion, but also his evasion. "And yet," he said, "a witness places you near the greenhouse, and this sketch suggests you had motive to act." Klein's eyes darted to the door, but he said nothing. Leaving the cottage, Poirot reflected on Klein's words. His grudge was palpable, and his knowledge of the tulip made him a dangerous suspect. The sketch confirmed that the rootless tulip was not solely Lady Eleanor's creation, adding a layer of betrayal to the motive. Poirot recalled the torn letter from Chapter 3, mentioning a deal with Verdant Innovations. Could Klein have been in contact with the biotech firm, seeking to sell the tulip's secrets? Or was he the shadowy figure, stealing the tulip to reclaim his legacy? Back at Vane Manor, Poirot shared his findings with Inspector Davies, requesting a check on Klein's whereabouts the night of the murder. He also visited the greenhouse where Mr. Harrow was sweeping the paths, his face a mask of unease. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot said. "This Victor Klein, did he ever return to the estate after his dismissal?" Harrow's broom paused. "Not that I saw, sir, but Lady Eleanor was jumpy about him, said he'd never forgive her." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you, monsieur, did you forgive her for keeping secrets, even from you?" Harrow's gaze dropped. "I did my job, that's all." But Poirot sensed a deeper loyalty or fear. He resolved to compare Klein's handwriting with the notebook found in the shed. Chapter 5, suspecting it might match. As night fell, Poirot stood by the manor's terrace, the greenhouse a dark silhouette. Klein's vendetta was a new thread in the web, joining Charles' greed, Lena's ambition, and the Foundation's interests. The tulip without roots, a symbol of innovation and betrayal, was at the heart of it all. The past, Poirot thought, is a garden of grudges, and Klein's roots run deep. He would pursue this disgraced apprentice, knowing the truth lay in the shadows he cast. Chapter 9. The Tulip Sept's Return. The dawn light crept over Vane Manor, painting the greenhouse in hues of amber and rose. Hercule Poirot stood at its entrance, his overcoat buttoned against the morning chill, his mind ablaze with the threads of the mystery, the poison's plant-based origin, the cryptic will Victor Klein's grudge, and the motives of Charles Vane and Dr. Lena Voss. The tulip without roots, stolen from the dining room on the night of Lady Eleanor's murder, remained the enigma at the heart of the case. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, twirling his moustache. The tulip is the key, and its secrets will unlock the truth. Poirot's morning inspection of the greenhouse was interrupted by a cry from Mr. Harrow, the gardener, who emerged from the glass structure, his face ashen. "Monsieur Poirot," he gasped. "It's back! The tulip! In the locked chamber." Poirot's grey cells sparked. The tulip vanished during the chaos of Lady Eleanor's poisoning, had returned as mysteriously as it had disappeared. He followed Harrow inside, navigating the labyrinth of exotic plants to the glass-partitioned chamber, now accessible since the police had forced the lock. There, on a sterile workbench, stood the tulip, its crimson petals streaked with gold, as vibrant as it had been in the crystal vase. No roots, no soil, yet it stood upright, defying nature. Poirot leaned closer, his keen eyes noting its pristine condition, no wilting, no decay. "Sacre bleu," he whispered. "It is as if time has not touched it." He produced a magnifying glass, a tool he always carried, and examined the petals. Under magnification he discovered faint, almost invisible markings, tiny etchings, like a code, embedded in the petal's surface. "Interessant," he said. "This is no natural flower. This is a creation of science." Poirot summoned Dr. Lena Voss, whose expertise was essential to understanding the markings. She arrived, her expression a mix of curiosity and unease. "Mademoiselle Voss," Poirot said, gesturing to the tulip, "this flower has returned, and it bears markings, genetic perhaps." "What do you know of this?" Lena's eyes widened as she examined the tulip through Poirot's magnifying glass. "These are micro-etchings," she said, her voice low. "They're used to track experimental specimens. Eleanor must have marked it to protect her work." She hesitated, then added, "This tulip is a prototype, a self-sustaining plant, capable of growing without soil. It could be worth millions." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Millions, mademoiselle. And who knew of this value?" Lena's lips tightened. "Eleanor, myself, and perhaps others." She was secretive, but the project wasn't hidden from her inner circle. Poirot noted her guarded tone, recalling her rivalry with Lady Eleanor from Chapter 4. "And you, mademoiselle," he pressed, "did you desire this tulip for yourself?" Lena's face flushed. "I wanted its success, not its possession, but I warned Eleanor others would kill for it." The conversation was cut short by a commotion outside. Inspector Davies burst into the greenhouse, his face grim. "Monsieur Poirot, there's been a break-in. Last night someone forced the greenhouse's rear door." Poirot followed him to the back entrance, where the lock was splintered, and glass shards littered the ground. Inside, several potted plants, rare orchids and hybrid ferns, were smashed, their soil scattered like a battlefield. Yet the tulip, alone in the locked chamber, remained untouched. "Curieux," Poirot murmured. "A thief who destroys but does not steal the prize. Why?" He examined the scene, noting scuff marks in the soil, boots similar to those of the shadowy figure from Chapter 5. The break-in suggested sabotage, perhaps to obscure the tulip's return, or to intimidate those investigating. Poirot questioned Harrow, who was sweeping up the debris, his hands trembling. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot said, "this break-in, did you hear nothing last night?" Harrow shook his head. "I was in my cottage, sir. Didn't know till morning." His evasion was familiar, and Poirot resolved to press him later. Returning to the locked chamber, Poirot found Charles Vane lingering nearby, his eyes fixed on the tulip. "Monsieur Vane," Poirot said, "you seem drawn to this flower, yet you claim it means nothing to you." Charles' smile was strained. "It's just strange, seeing it back. Aunt Eleanor was obsessed with it." Poirot tilted his head. "And you, monsieur? Did you know its value, millions, as Mademoiselle Voss says?" Charles' face paled. I knew it was important, but not like that. I thought it was just her hobby. Poirot's grey cells hummed. The tulip's return raised new questions. Who had taken it, and why return it now? Was it a taunt, a distraction, or a mistake? The micro-etchings suggested a level of sophistication tied to Lady Eleanor's project, and the break-in pointed to an external hand, perhaps Victor Klein, whose grudge and expertise made him a prime suspect. Poirot recalled the sketch in Klein's notebook from Chapter 8, mirroring the tulip's design. Could Klein have stolen it, only to return it to sow chaos? He visited the Manor's library, where he reviewed Lady Eleanor's journal, now in police custody, but accessible for his investigation. An entry caught his eye. The tulip is marked, a safeguard against theft, but the Foundation must never know. They would exploit it. The mention of the Vane Botanical Research Foundation from Chapter 7 suggested internal betrayal. Was the Foundation's board involved, or was Charles's claim of their greed accurate? As night fell, Poirot stood by the greenhouse, its glass walls reflecting the moon's pale light. The tulip's return was no accident. It was a move in a deadly game. The break-in, the untouched tulip, and the micro-etchings pointed to a calculated act, perhaps to protect or expose the tulip's secrets. Carline's vendetta, Charles's debts, Lena's ambition, and Harrow's secrets formed a web, but the tulip was its center. The flower, Poirot thought, is a beacon of truth, and Hercule Poirot will follow its light. Chapter 10. The Corporate Conspiracy. The late afternoon sun cast a golden haze over Vane Manor, its rays glinting off the greenhouse where the rootless tulip had mysteriously reappeared. Hercule Poirot stood on the manor's terrace, his hands clasped behind his back, his little grey cells weaving together the threads of the case. The poison's botanical origin, the cryptic will, Victor Klein's grudge, and the tulip's micro-etched markings. The torn letter from Charles Vane's room, mentioning a deal with Verdant Innovations, had lingered in Poirot's mind, suggesting a corporate hand in Lady Eleanor's murder. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, stroking his moustache, "where there is wealth, there is greed, and greed blooms in the shadows of ambition." Poirot's investigation led him to request a meeting with Miss Clara Holt, a representative of Verdant Innovations, the biotech firm named in the letter. Inspector Davies, cooperative but skeptical, arranged for Miss Holt to visit the manor, citing her recent presence in the village. She arrived promptly, a poised woman in her 40s with sharp features and a tailored suit that spoke of corporate polish. Her cool blue eyes met Poirot's with a calculated calm. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending a hand, "I understand you're investigating Lady Eleanor's tragic death. I'm happy to assist." Poirot settled into the manor's drawing room, gesturing for Miss Holt to sit. "Mademoiselle Holt," he began, his tone courteous but piercing, "Verdant Innovations has an interest in Lady Eleanor's work, n'est-ce pas? Specifically, this tulip without roots, a marvel worth millions, I am told." Clara's smile was practiced. "We're a biotech firm, monsieur. Lady Eleanor's research into self-sustaining plants was of interest. Yes, we offered to fund her work, to bring it to market, but she declined." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Declined, mademoiselle, yet I have evidence of a deal involving her nephew, Charles Vane. A letter, torn but revealing, found in his rooms." He produced a facsimile of the letter from Chapter 3, watching Clara's reaction. Her composure flickered, a slight tightening of her jaw. "I don't know about any letter," she said. "Charles approached us. Yes, but only to discuss potential partnerships. Nothing was finalized." Sensing evasion, Poirot pressed further. He had asked Inspector Davies to check local bank records, and the inspector had uncovered a curious transaction, a substantial deposit into Charles's account, traced to an offshore account linked to Verdant Innovations. "Mademoiselle Holt," Poirot said, his voice soft but unyielding. "A bribe, perhaps? To persuade Charles to secure the tulip secrets, when Lady Eleanor would not." Clara's eyes narrowed. "That's absurd. Any funds were for legitimate business discussions. I deal in innovation, not murder." "Odd." Poirot's grey cells hummed. The bribe suggested Charles was more than a desperate heir. He was a conduit to the Tulip's technology, but was Clara the mastermind, or a pawn in a larger scheme? Poirot recalled the will from Chapter 7, which left the Tulip's patents to the Vane Botanical Research Foundation. Could Verdant Innovations have pressured Charles to undermine the foundation, or even eliminate Lady Eleanor to gain control? To test this theory, Poirot visited Charles in the Manor's library, where he found him poring over financial ledgers, his face drawn. "Monsieur Vane," Poirot said, "this Verdant Innovations. Your dealings with them were not innocent. None? A deposit in your account. A letter promising millions. What did you offer in return?" Charles's hands trembled, but he met Poirot's gaze. "I was trying to save the estate," he said. "Aunt Eleanor's foundation would have bled it dry. Verdant offered a way out, a partnership to market her tulip. I didn't kill her, Poirot. I just wanted to secure my future." Poirot tilted his head. "Your future, monsieur, or your debts? You stood to lose everything under her will." Charles's voice cracked. "I know how it looks, but I didn't poison her. Someone else wanted that tulip. Someone with more to gain." His eyes darted toward the greenhouse, and Poirot noted the hint. Was Charles pointing to Dr. Voss, Mr. Harrow, or even Victor Klein? Seeking more context, Poirot returned to the greenhouse, where the tulip stood in its locked chamber, its micro-etchings a silent testament to its value. He reviewed Lady Eleanor's journal, finding an entry from 2 months prior. Verdant presses for access, but their motives are impure. The tulip must remain with the foundation. The note suggested Lady Eleanor distrusted the company, perhaps suspecting their corporate greed. Poirot wondered if Clara Holt had visited the manor before the murder, as Mrs. Grayson had mentioned in Chapter 7. He questioned the housekeeper again, finding her in the kitchen. "Madame Grayson," Poirot said. "This woman from Verdant Innovations, did she meet Lady Eleanor?" Mrs. Grayson nodded. "Once, a few weeks ago. They argued in the study. Lady Eleanor said she'd never sell her work to vultures." The woman left angry. Poirot's mind raced. Clara's denial of a direct meeting with Lady Eleanor was a lie, and lies were the roots of guilt. As evening fell, Poirot stood by the greenhouse, its glass walls reflecting the twilight. The corporate conspiracy was clear. Verdant Innovations coveted the tulip's technology, and Charles's bribe suggested he was their inside man. But had they orchestrated the murder, or merely exploited it? The tulip's return in Chapter 9, untouched amidst the break-in, hinted at a larger plan, perhaps to distract from the real target, Lady Eleanor's patents. Poirot resolved to investigate Verdant's board and their ties to the Van Foundation, suspecting overlap. The Tulip Without Roots, with its promise to revolutionize agriculture, was a prize that drew corporate predators. Charles's greed, Lena's ambition, Klein's vendetta, and Harrow's secrets all swirled around it, but Clara Holt's involvement added a new dimension. The tulip, Poirot thought, is a flame, and greed is the moth. Hercule Poirot will see who burns. Chapter 11. The night of the murder. The evening shadows deepened over Vane Manor, cloaking its ancient walls in a sombre hush. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand dining hall, where Lady Eleanor Vane had collapsed, poisoned just days ago. The crystal chandelier above gleamed faintly, casting fractured light across the mahogany table, now bare of its fatal centerpiece, the Tulip Without Roots. Poirot's little grey cells thrummed with the case's complexities, the poison's botanical origin, the cryptic will Victor Klein's grudge, Charles Vane's bribe, and the tulip's mysterious return. To unravel the killer's method, Poirot resolved to reconstruct the night of the murder. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, stroking his moustache. "The truth lies in the moments before death, and Hercule Poirot will illuminate them." Poirot gathered the key witnesses, servants, guests, and suspects in the dining hall, with Inspector Davies observing. His method was meticulous by piecing together their accounts. He would map the timeline and uncover discrepancies. He began with the butler. "Mr. Simmons, a stoic man with a keen memory." "Monsieur Simmons," Poirot said, his voice calm but probing. "Describe the evening. Who handled the wine, the food, the tulip?" Simmons recounted the dinner's flow: the consommé served at 7:30 p.m., the pheasant at 8 o'clock, and the wine poured just before Lady Eleanor's collapse at 8:15. The tulip was in its vase, Simmons said, until the chaos. I didn't see who took it. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The wine, identified in Chapter 6 as the poison's delivery method, was key. He turned to the maid, Ellen, a nervous girl who had lingered near the table that night. "Mademoiselle Ellen," he said gently, "you saw something, n'est-ce pas? Something you hesitated to share." Ellen's hands twisted her apron. I saw Mr. Harrow, sir. He was near the sideboard where the wine was kept just before dinner. He poured something into a decanter, but I thought it was just wine." The room stirred. Mr. Harrow, standing at the back, paled, his weathered hands clenching. "That's a lie," he snapped. "I was checking the bottles as Lady Eleanor asked. I didn't touch the wine." Poirot tilted his head. "Vraiment, Monsieur Harrow? Yet you have access to the greenhouse, where the poison, a plant-based alkaloid, was crafted, and now you were seen with the wine." Harrow's eyes darted to the door, but he said nothing more. Poirot moved to the physical evidence, examining the dining table's layout with Inspector Davies. The crystal vase, now empty, had stood at the table's center, directly in front of Lady Eleanor. The wine-glass she used, shattered during her collapse, had been analyzed, confirming the presence of the alkaloid, from Chapter 6. Poirot noted the table's arrangement. Charles Vane sat to Lady Eleanor's right, Dr. Lenavos opposite, and Harrow had moved freely as a servant. Any could have tampered with the wine, but the tulip's disappearance suggested a deliberate distraction. He questioned Charles next. "Monsieur Vane," Poirot said, "you were close to your aunt. Did you see anyone approach the vase?" Charles' face was drawn. His charm faded. "No, Monsieur Poirot. It was chaos when she fell. I was trying to help her." His voice trembled, but Poirot recalled the bribe from Verdant Innovations in Chapter 10. "And yet," Poirot said, "your dealings with Verdant suggest you coveted her work. Perhaps you ensured her silence." Charles's eyes flashed. "I didn't poison her. I swear it." Poirot noted his desperation, then turned to Dr. Voss, whose cool demeanor contrasted with Charles's agitation. "Mademoiselle Voss," he said, "you knew the tulip's value. Did you see it taken?" Lena's gaze was steady. "I was watching Eleanor, not the vase. But I agree, the tulip's theft was a distraction. Someone wanted us focused on it, not the poison." Her insight was sharp, but Poirot wondered if it was a deflection. To refine the timeline, Poirot revisited the maid's testimony. Ellen clarified that Harrow's tampering occurred around 7 p.m., before guests arrived. This meant the poison was likely added early, ensuring Lady Eleanor's glass was tainted. Poirot examined the sideboard, finding a faint residue in the decanter, which he sent to Dr. Finch for analysis. The residue matched the alkaloid, confirming the wine as the murder weapon. "Interessant," Poirot said. The poison was prepared in advance, a calculated act. He then considered the tulip's theft. The vase had been untouched until Lady Eleanor's collapse, when all eyes were on her. The thief had acted swiftly, exploiting the chaos. Poirot recalled the micro-etchings from Chapter 9, suggesting the tulip was a marked prototype. Its theft and return hinted at a plan to control or obscure its value. Was it Charles hoping to sell it to Verdant? Voss, protecting her scientific legacy? Harrow, hiding his involvement? Or Victor Klein, seeking revenge? Poirot questioned the groundskeeper Tom, who had seen the shadowy figure in the garden. Chapter 5. "Monsieur Tom," he said, "this figure, could they have entered the dining hall?" Tom shook his head. "Dunno, sir. They was outside, near the greenhouse. This suggested the figure was separate from the thief, complicating the plot." Poirot's grey cells hummed. The murder required coordination, one to poison the wine, another to steal the tulip, perhaps a third in the garden. As night fell, Poirot stood alone in the dining hall, the empty vase a silent witness. The timeline revealed a meticulous plan. Poison prepared early, wine tainted, tulip stolen in the chaos. Harrow's alleged tampering, Charles's financial motive, Voss's expertise, and Klein's grudge all pointed to a conspiracy. The Tulip's return suggested the killer was still active, manipulating the scene. The night of the murder, Poirot thought, was a stage, and the actors played their parts. But Hercule Poirot will rewrite the script. Chapter 12. The Rootless Truth. The drawing-room of Vane Manor glowed under the soft light of its chandeliers, the air thick with anticipation as Hercule Poirot stood at its center, his polished shoes gleaming, his moustache impeccably trimmed. The suspects, Charles Vane, Dr. Lena Voss, Mr. Harrow, and Miss Clara Holt of Verdant Innovations, sat in a tense semicircle, their faces a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Inspector Davies stood by the door, his notebook ready, while the Manor's staff hovered at the edges. The rootless tulip, the poison, the will, and the shadowy figure had led Poirot to this moment. "Mes amis," he said, his voice resonant, "the time has come for Hercule Poirot to reveal the truth of Lady Eleanor's murder and the mystery of the tulip without roots." Poirot began with the crime's mechanics. Reconstructed in Chapter 11, Lady Eleanor was poisoned with a plant-based alkaloid, administered through her wine. The tulip, displayed in a crystal vase, vanished during the chaos of her collapse, only to reappear in the greenhouse with micro-etchings, a prototype of immense value. The question is, who orchestrated this murder, and why? He turned to Charles Vane, whose nervous eyes betrayed his unease. "Monsieur Vane, your debts," and the torn letter from Verdant Innovations suggested greed. "You stood to lose your inheritance under Lady Eleanor's will, which favored the Vane Botanical Research Foundation. You sought a deal to sell the tulip secrets, n'est-ce pas?" Charles flushed, stammering, "I needed money, yes, but I didn't kill her." Poirot raised a hand, silencing him. "Patience, monsieur. You are not the killer. But you played a role." He pivoted to Miss Clara Holt, whose corporate polish masked a calculating mind. Mademoiselle Holt, Verdant Innovations coveted the tulip's technology, a plant that could grow without soil worth millions. You bribed Charles to gain access, but Lady Eleanor refused your offers. Did you not seek a more permanent solution? Clara's lips tightened. "I deal in business, not murder," she said, but her voice wavered. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Lena Voss, whose scientific ambition had been evident since Chapter 4. "Mademoiselle Voss, your rivalry with Lady Eleanor and your knowledge of the tulip's genetic anomaly made you a suspect. You argued with her over the project's direction, and your notes revealed its value. Did you seek to claim her legacy?" Lena's eyes flashed. "I wanted recognition, not her death." Finally, Poirot faced Mr. Harrow, the gardener, whose unease had grown since the maid's accusation in Chapter 11. "Monsieur Harrow, you were seen tampering with the wine, and you had access to the greenhouse where the poison was crafted. Your loyalty to Lady Eleanor was clear, but was it a mask?" Harrow's hands trembled. "I didn't do it, sir. I swear." Poirot's smile was serene. "Mes amis. The truth is a tapestry woven from many threads. Let us unravel it." He recounted the clues. The vial with the tulip symbol, Chapter 6, the micro-etchings, Chapter 9, the break-in, Chapter 9, and the will's warning, Chapter 7. "The tulip was no mere flower," he said. "It was a scientific marvel, engineered to defy nature, marked to protect it from theft. But its creation involved unethical methods, hidden even from the Foundation." He turned to the shadowy figure from Chapter 5, revealed through Inspector Davis's inquiries as Victor Klein, the disgraced apprentice from Chapter 8. "Monsieur Klein, you were not here tonight, but your presence haunts this case. Your sketch of the rootless tulip and your vow of revenge made you a suspect. Yet you were not the killer, merely a catalyst." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The true killer is among us, and their motive was control of the tulip's patents." Poirot paced, his voice rising. "The poison required expertise, the theft required opportunity, and the break-in was a distraction. This was no lone act but a conspiracy. Mademoiselle Holt, you orchestrated the plan, using Charles as your pawn. You bribed him to secure the tulip's secrets, but when Lady Eleanor refused, you turned to another with access to the greenhouse." He faced Harrow. Monsieur Harrow, you were her tool. Your loyalty was bought. Not by love, but by Verdant's money. You poisoned the wine as the maid saw, using the alkaloid from the greenhouse. Harrow's face crumpled. I didn't want to, he cried. They promised to save the estate to protect her work. I only added the poison. They said it would just make her sleep. Clara's composure shattered. That's a lie, she snapped, but Poirot raised a hand. Non, mademoiselle. The tulip's return was your mistake. You stole it to study its micro-etchings, but returned it to deflect suspicion, unaware of the break-in's timing. Poirot revealed the final piece, a hidden ledger found in the greenhouse's locked chamber, documenting payments from Verdant to Harrow. The tulip was the prize, he said, but Lady Eleanor's refusal to sell led to her death. Charles, you were complicit, but not the mastermind. Mademoiselle Voss, your ambition was genuine, but you were innocent. Caline, your grudge inspired others, but you acted alone in the shadows. Inspector Davies stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Clara Holt, William Harrow, you're under arrest for the murder of Lady Eleanor Vane. The room erupted in gasps as Clara protested, but Harrow's confession sealed their fate. Poirot stood back, his grey cells at rest. The tulip without roots, he said, was a dream of progress, but it grew from betrayal. Hercule Poirot restores the order. Chapter 13. The garden restored. The morning sun bathed Vane Manor in a gentle glow, its rays filtering through the greenhouse's glass panes, where the air was fragrant with the promise of renewal. Hercule Poirot stood on the manor's terrace, his overcoat neatly buttoned, his moustache immaculate, as he surveyed the gardens that had been the stage for a deadly drama. The mystery of Lady Eleanor Vane's murder had been solved. Clara Holt and Mr. Harrow, driven by corporate greed and misplaced loyalty, had poisoned her to seize the rootless tulip's secrets, with Charles Vane as their unwitting pawn. Now, as the dust settled, Poirot reflected on the cost of ambition. Mon Dieu, he murmured, stroking his moustache, a garden may be restored, but the scars of betrayal linger. The manor buzzed with quiet activity as the police finalized their work. Clara Holt and Mr. Harrow were in custody, their confessions extracted under Poirot's relentless logic, securing their fate. Charles Vane, though complicit in accepting bribes from Verdant Innovations, had avoided charges by cooperating with Inspector Davies, revealing the full extent of Clara's scheme. The torn letter, the hidden ledger, and the micro-etched tulip had all pointed to a conspiracy to control Lady Eleanor's revolutionary plant, but Poirot's grey cells had unraveled the truth. Poirot visited the greenhouse one final time, where the rootless tulip stood in its locked chamber, its crimson petals still vibrant, a testament to Lady Eleanor's genius. Lana Voss, cleared of suspicion, was cataloguing the greenhouse's contents for the Vane Botanical Research Foundation, which had assumed control of the estate per Lady Eleanor's will. She looked up as Poirot entered, her face weary but determined. Mademoiselle Voss, Poirot said, his tone gentle. You carry on Lady Eleanor's legacy, but what of the tulip? Its beauty hides a dangerous truth, n'est-ce pas? Lena nodded, setting down her notebook. It's a marvel, Monsieur Poirot, but its creation involved unethical methods, genetic tampering that could harm more than help. Eleanor knew it, and that's why she protected it. She paused, her voice softening. I've decided to destroy it. The Foundation will focus on sustainable research, not shortcuts that invite greed. Poirot's eyes gleamed with approval. Sage décision, mademoiselle. Nature must be respected, not defied. The tulip was incinerated that afternoon, its ashes scattered in the garden under Lena's supervision. Poirot watched from a distance, noting the symbolic end of a dream that had cost her life. The Foundation, now led by Lena and a reformed board, vowed to honor Lady Eleanor's vision ethically, funding research to benefit agriculture without corporate exploitation. Charles, stripped of his inheritance but spared prison, had left for London, promising to rebuild his life free of debts and schemes. Poirot sought out Mrs. Grayson, the housekeeper who was tending the manor's rose beds. Madam, he said, this estate has seen much sorrow. Will it heal? Mrs. Grayson smiled faintly. It will, sir. The gardens will bloom again. and the foundation will do good. Lady Eleanor would be pleased. Poirot nodded, touched by her quiet resilience. The staff, shaken by Harrow's betrayal, had rallied to support the manor's transition, their loyalty to Lady Eleanor's memory unshaken. As evening approached, Poirot walked the grounds, passing the low stone wall where the shadowy figure Victor Klein had been spotted. Klein, though not the killer, had lurked near the estate, driven by a grudge that inspired Clara's plan. Inspector Davies had tracked him down, but Klein faced only minor charges for trespass, his role limited to stirring the pot of vengeance. Poirot mused on the irony. A disgraced apprentice had been a catalyst, yet the true culprits hid in plain sight. In the manor's library, Poirot met with Inspector Davies to review the case's closure. "Monsieur Poirot," Davies said, shaking his hand, "your method is extraordinary. Without you, we'd have missed the conspiracy." Poirot's smile was modest. "Non-inspector, it is merely order and method, the work of the little grey cells. The tulip was the heart of this crime, and its destruction ensures no further betrayal." As he prepared to leave Vane Manor, Poirot paused by the greenhouse, its glass walls reflecting the twilight. He thought of Lady Eleanor's warning in her will, "Beware the flower that defies nature." The tulip without roots had been a symbol of ambition unbound, drawing greed like moths to a flame. Clara's corporate hunger, Harrow's misguided loyalty, and Charles's desperation had woven a deadly web, but Poirot had cut through it with precision. He found Lina Voss in the conservatory, planting a new seedling, a simple rose rooted in rich soil. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "you've given us a chance to start anew. Thank you." Poirot bowed slightly. "Mademoiselle, it is you who will restore the garden. Keep it true to nature, and it will flourish." Lina's smile was genuine, a spark of hope in the wake of tragedy. Poirot stepped into the waiting car, the manor fading into the dusk as he departed. The case had tested his intellect, but it had also reminded him of humanity's delicate balance with nature. Ambition, unchecked, could poison as surely as any alkaloid. The garden is restored, he thought, but the lesson remains: to defy nature is to invite chaos. As the car rolled through the Kentish lanes, Poirot's grey cells rested, ready for the next mystery to bloom.